Welcome, I'm Christine Collins, and today we are going to dive down the rabbit hole and have a little bit of fun talking about your message through the lens of desire, and also looks after the mindset of both your audience and you. Before we dive in, I would like to acknowledge the custodians of the lands and waterways on which I live and work, which is the 𝐻𝐿, 𝐵𝒂, and 𝒚𝒂 tribes. And I would like to pay my respects to the wisdom, creativity, and integrity of elders past, present, and emerging. So now we're all going to morph into the Wonderland version of ourselves, but we're going to make it an adventure, and we won't come back empty-handed. You may already know me, but briefly, I'm Christine Collins, and I help intuitive, imaginative solopreneurs to make their business feel easier with both mindset and messaging support. And my background is that I have a master's in psychology and a master's in marketing, and I'm also a certified master NLP hypnotherapist, as well as an EFT and yoga nidra practitioner. Messaging to your niche clients' lived experience and desire, some of which we'll talk through today, and all of that marries together to help you to feel better and be more successful in your business. And you are here because you're probably drawn to imaginative things like I am, but you're also interested in up-leveling your messaging because you write your own copy and you create your own content, and you want a message that resonates and connects. So I would like to formally invite you to tea with a very warm welcome for all of my intuitive, introspective, empathic, sensitive, neurodivergent, misfit, multi-passionate, occasionally perfectionistic, and self-reflective solopreneurs. You want your message to be a light to the world. You being able to light that path for them is in itself a service. So let's get on our way and off down the rabbit hole. When we emerge today from our journey through Wonderland, we're going to have a better understanding of how to craft messages that reach and engage our audience and have a conversation around the darker sides of marketing, pain point dialing marketing, compared to bringing your light into the world and selling effectively without doing harm. And this is really important because we are often taking care of people who have already been done harm, who have already been traumatized, and that's exactly what we want to avoid doing. So we'll learn how to stay in integrity while singing out our song like a siren to our perfect peeps. Now, just after Alice falls down the rabbit hole, much like us on our journey, she finds herself standing in this mystical hall of doors. And these doors represent all of the different possibilities. Through one door, there's a beautiful garden, and this could represent desire. And through some of the other doors, there are spaces where maybe pain point marketing is the law of the land. Now, it won't be up to me today to tell you which door to walk through. You get to choose for yourself and for your business. I am merely here to help you to unlock each one with a little bit of insight so that you can choose more wisely. So Alice opens a very tiny little door and discovers with delight that it leads into a beautiful rose garden. Of course, the problem is that the little door is too small for her to fit through, and Wonderland immediately begins offering her various little cakes and potions in order to help her change her size. But if we assume that this little cake is a viable solution for Alice, there are different ways that her predicament might be approached by different marketers here. So one marketer might be coming along and saying, "You'll never get into that little garden at your size. And aren't you just so tired of being unable to get into that garden? How horrible for you. Here's a little cake that will make you small, and then you can have your heart's desire to get into that garden." Now, we can define this type of approach as pain dialing marketing because it aims to dial up Alice's pain and the problem, pressing on her wound and on her concerns, and then presenting her with some type of quick fix solution to get away from the pain. In neurolinguistics, we call this away motivated messaging. It places the focus on the pain that the person wants to get away from. Now, there are alternative approaches. A different marketer might come along to Alice and say something like, "Oh my goodness, I see that you're crying and you're upset, and I'm so sorry that you're having a hard moment. Don't give up, because this hallway is filled with doors and the right one will open to you. You really can get to your goal, whether it's this garden or a different one. Something beautiful is waiting for you, and here are some of the possibilities that exist. And if you'd like some help with navigating these different doors, I'm here to help." Now, this is a more desire-focused approach. It's more hopeful, it's more compassionate, it's more expansive, opening up the window into possibilities, and it seeks to reveal to Alice an important truth that is unique to her, and that truth is her own personal realm of possibilities. What is possible for her? Part of our role as practitioners is to be able to envision that realm of possibilities for our client, even when they are feeling hopeless, and to provide them with a window into that realm so that they can start believing that what feels impossible right now might actually be possible. And from the neurolinguistic side, this would be more of a toward-motivated conversation where we are speaking mostly about what the person wishes to move towards and focusing on what could be possible in a hopeful, optimistic way that's uplifting, rather than solely focusing on escaping from the painful or unpleasant thing. So it's a good time now to distinguish between acknowledging someone's pain and showing compassion for it versus deliberately dialing up the pain and pressing on the wound. During her Wonderland visit, Alice is frequently met with what we could call contempt from the various characters. They are looking down on her, they're being condescending. Most of them don't come across as being overly concerned with her plight. Many of them are rather self-centered. And unfortunately, sometimes we do see this in various spaces in the marketing world, where someone may act as though the client is genuinely foolish for not signing up for something or not pursuing a service or product. They actually feel annoyed when people don't buy, rather than trying to solve their needs, and they're much more heavily focused on themselves and on making their sales and their numbers over providing excellent service. So to me, that in itself is the primary red flag or attitude of a classic pain point marketer. There is very little regard for the actual client or the audience, and it almost seems like any tactic is fair game if it's going to make a sale. So in the example I gave you, the pain point marketer has a tone that is a little bit condescending. They're speaking only about the pain and intentionally dialing up how utterly awful Alice must feel in this predicament, and then offering their product as the sole solution to her problem. So one major factor for us to pay attention to help us to distinguish pain dialing marketing is the tone. Is it condescending? Is it contemptuous? Is it dialing up shame and pain? So what kind of a headspace does this marketer seem to be coming from? Is it one in which they are better than Alice, more knowledgeable than Alice, more successful than Alice, and looking down on her plight in a condescending manner? Now, on the flip side, our desire-focused marketer comes in with a box of tissues and a cup of tea and is here to listen and to try to help. This marketer may share their own story of struggle, but they do so from the standpoint of being a peer, not looking down on you in your current plight. And the desire-focused marketer genuinely wants you to feel better, to be happier, to have a better situation. And that is the case whether or not you buy from them. There is no manipulation of emotions. There's no pressing on the pain. And if the problem or the struggle is discussed, it's done with empathy and consideration. So pain dialing marketing is marketing that sets out to deliberately press on that feeling of pain or emotional vulnerability, and doing so with an intention to impact the emotional scale of the target audience in order to make a sale. Whereas desire-focused messaging aims to inspire a sense of delight, to make the person feel seen and understood, and to give them a sense of hope about improving whatever it is that they would like to improve. So we're not overlooking the problem, we're not ignoring the pain, we're not nullifying or minimizing the struggle of the person or the audience. Instead, we are greeting those difficulties with understanding and compassion. So, identifying the difference between a pain-dialing marketer and a desire-focused marketer. And the hint here is that it's got nothing to do with their service, their modality, their education, their training, or their skills. It's got nothing to do with their abilities with language or writing, but it does have everything to do with their intentions and their philosophy, their perspective of the client relationship and how that plays out in their message. Now, obviously, we know that good intentions alone are not enough, but they really are very important, and their intention and their philosophy about who that client is to them. And one of the key foundational philosophies that we can adopt, which will heavily impact our messaging, is that the client that's coming into our realm is sacred. The relationship with them is sacred. Whether they are paying us money or giving up an email address or merely following us on socials, that is an honor. It's an honor. And when we understand that, we will craft our messaging in ways that honor the intrinsic and unshakable value of that relationship. So when someone becomes what I call one of my peeps, that's what I call my clients, it's kind of like they're coming under the wing of the giant raven in my logo and resting there for however long until they go back off to where they want to go next. The time that we spend together as practitioner and client is sacred. And even after they leave, the respect that I hold for them is forever because they have once been a peep. Now, as Alice traverses through Wonderland, she eventually encounters the Queen of Hearts, who is representative of that more pain-dialing, emotionally manipulative personality, running around saying off with their heads and motivating people through fear and pain. So what's on the flip side of this philosophy that the client is sacred? That would be that the client is inferior, and a pain point dialer can be identified with certain characteristics and traits. So sometimes I'll see references to certain types of modalities as being connected to sleazy marketing or manipulative marketing. And I think that that's problematic because the actual piece that matters is whether or not they have a problematic philosophy, that they will do harm with whatever tool they have at their disposal. The element that makes someone choose emotionally manipulative marketing is far more connected to how they feel about the clients that they're trying to sell to. If that relationship is sacred to them, that will come through in the messaging. And in contrast, if they have what we term dark triad traits, they are more likely to feel comfortable with a little stretching of the truth or a little manipulation. So the dark triad traits are known in the psych world to be, number 1, manipulativeness, which is also called Machiavellianism. Number 2 is narcissism. And number 3 is psychopathy, which is essentially a lack of empathy for other humans. Now, of course, all traits are across a spectrum. Sometimes we end up blaming a tool or a skill set, but it is getting misused by the wrong person, and it's not getting separated out from these dark triad traits and the personality characteristics of someone who has a tendency to misuse these things in their marketing practice. Now, during most of her visit to Wonderland, the characters that Alice encounters are trying to convince her that there's something wrong with her. And unfortunately, this is not an uncommon experience for women navigating the world of marketing and being advertised to. as we start to take apart and dissect these things, it all falls to pieces. Not unlike what occurs as she's leaving Wonderland and all of the strange characters that she met suddenly begin to resemble nothing but a pack of cards, just crumbling down all around her. Because historically, marketing has very often tried to convince women that the only way to achieve acceptance and love and well-being is to eat something, drink something, do something, put something on their face or their body, or to buy something. It only takes a 2-minute online search to uncover that, quote, cellulite doesn't really exist. And in the end, it turns out to be nothing more than a slight difference between men and women in the way that fat gets deposited beneath the dermal layers of the skin. And all of this was partially accomplished through dialing up pain and shame, implanting a sense of insecurity and inadequacy. And also, there's a component of language in many, many pain-dialing marketing schemes. And in this case, they would describe the alleged made-up condition of cellulite as, quote, unsightly. Women were actually led to believe that the appearance of cellulite was a sign of poor health rather than a completely ordinary deposit of fat. It was painted as a disease with the use of words like toxins and degenerated flesh, leaving women desperate for a method to cure it. So we can see here the incredibly powerful impact of language choices, and this just kind of riles up the neurolinguist in me. The emotional impact that these language choices would surely have had. This type of marketing capitalizes on innate fears of not being socially accepted, considered attractive, and it plays upon the neuroscience that's innate in women's survival instincts to not be rejected by social groups and by potential mating partners. Now we're beginning to become savvy enough to understand that these tactics are deliberate. There is a dark side to this type of marketing. And this, unfortunately, is what has been handed down and taught in terms of how to do sales. That's kind of been the legacy. So it's no wonder that it feels icky to us. And it's the polar opposite of what we want to do for our audience. So let's shift into looking closer at the psychological and physiological impact this type of marketing has on a target audience. Now, our archetype here is the Mad Hatter because the damage inflicted by this type of psychological harm is not completely different from the mercury poisoning that most likely claimed his sanity. So when anxiety, pain, and shame are dialed up intentionally in someone, the brain's limbic system becomes heightened and epinephrine is released, and at the same time, those good-feeling neurotransmitters of dopamine and serotonin are disrupted. Now, dopamine and serotonin we need for activities like creativity, problem solving, generating new innovative ideas. And when we slip into states of panic, shame, anxiety, and unease, it actually robs us of the ability to create new things, to think logically, to make good decisions. So this pain-dialing approach, which freezes up the nervous system, in many ways also seeks to incapacitate a target from making good, measured choices. And in addition to the fact of it not being necessary or even ethical to do this to dial up pain and shame and insecurity and inadequacy, it's actually less effective from a neuroscientific standpoint. So we've talked at length about the harm in pain-dialing marketing, but let's take a peek at the efficacy, because the supposed effectiveness of this style of marketing is the entire reason for its continued use, that people believe that it works. But there are giant holes in that logic. When we actually dissect the neuroscience, the efficacy argument really kind of falls down. Our magical brains are very attentive to whatever we tell them to be attentive to, and that comes from our reticular activating system, which is the part of the brain that will continuously look for more evidence of something that we've trained it to pay attention to do. And so that's the reason why if we decide, for example, that we like a certain brand of car, we suddenly start seeing it everywhere on the road. It is, however, very difficult for that mechanism to work around the absence of something. So if we decide that there's something that we don't want to think about, don't want to do, or want to get away from, it's actually kind of challenging for our brain to process that, because that reticular activating system is designed through thousands of years of evolution to find the thing that we have placed such an emphasis on. But where it really doesn't work very well is if we decide to try and do something like avoid cake. If we set a goal to not eat cake, our brain is still nonetheless focused on cake, and it will seek out and find every darn cake within a radius of us. And this is actually the same mechanism that makes it difficult sometimes for people to get away from toxic or unhealthy relationships or situations. It's difficult to try to avoid thinking about something without thinking about it constantly. So using the cake scenario, it would be much better instead to choose to focus on something else, like a replacement such as strawberries. Because then our brain will continue to look for and find strawberries and create opportunities for us to pursue them. So when we put this in the context of pain dialing marketing, which is solely focused on the pitch to get someone away from something unwanted or painful, it's actually a little bit challenging for that person to visualize or imagine the absence of the struggle or the pain, especially if they've been in it for a really long time. It's much easier to digest what things could be like instead, to paint a picture of how it could be different, and imagining a more desirable situation or experience. A large percentage of people are naturally far more motivated by desire, moving towards something that they want versus getting away from something that they don't want. And when you are only ever using pain dialing, at least half or more of the audience won't even hear your message. They're in a totally different vibrational state. They're going to tune you out because it does not speak to them in any way that makes sense. And so these are just really basic neuroscientific and neurolinguistic principles that just happen to also support the problems that we have with this process ethically. And one of the most important things in marketing and in messaging is the relationship. That trust is vital, especially if you want to have a long-term repeat client who will either continue to come back to you or maybe refer their friends to you or talk about your work in a really positive way. The last thing that we want is somebody who's been so violated by the marketing tactics, but it's not going to be a sustainable long-term business relationship. So in Wonderland, there's this mysterious looking glass where Alice discovers that she can actually step through it and enter into the looking glass world and interact with the creatures there. And similarly, we are kind of stepping into this magical mirror, into the audience's world and into their lived experience so that we can extract some elements that are very relevant to them. Let's just break down some clear and tangible examples for you, and let's talk about how you can create some offers with content and language that meet the needs of that audience. That is the most tangible way to write really captivating copy. You are encapsulating their experience, taking their everyday life, painting it for them as a reflection back to them that really resonates. And the good news is you don't need to know a whole lot to be able to speak to that. You just really need a scene. So let's just say that we have a business where the client wants to make more money or increase their pricing. So the things that they want to move towards would be a sense of confidence, a sense of security and safety, a sense of worthiness and feeling comfortable and feeling safe to raise their prices. And the thing that they want to get away from is a feeling of unworthiness, shame or fear around increasing their prices, and worrying about people not buying from them. So let's compare what a pain dialing marketer would do versus what our desire focused marketer would do. So a pain marketer might come along and say things like, oh geez, aren't you tired of feeling like crap about your stupidly low prices? You know, your work is just dirt cheap, and I guess you feel like it's just not worth anything, don't you? Aren't you tired of being lowballed? Aren't you tired of freebie hunters and people taking advantage of you? Gosh, you're just always getting taken advantage of, aren't you? And the underlying tone is, again, condescending, like you just can't get it right. And I always encourage people, like when you're scrolling on socials and you see an ad, read it and analyze it for that. I'll kind of pay attention to how I'm feeling in my body and the emotional response that I'm having to those words in that moment. How does this make me feel? And that will help to give you a good indication of how those words are landing and how they might land for your audience. So they're actively dialing up the pain, actively pressing on the wound and the negative emotion. Now, the alternative approach from the desire-focused marketer is not to gloss over the struggle or pretend that the pain isn't there, but instead they might start out by saying something like, I see you, hesitating again to raise your pricing. I see your finger hovering over that mouse, wanting to click update to change the price, and you're feeling stuck. Even though you're delivering something really important to the world and you deserve to be paid well for it and to feel confident and worthy and knowing that you deserve to be paid well for it. So you're talking to them very differently. Even though you're talking to the same person and the same problem, you're not speaking down to them, you're uplifting them, you're encouraging them, you're complimenting them, you're painting a picture of something that's more hopeful that they could potentially move towards, and you're opening that window into hope and possibility for them. There's a compassionate response to their lived experience that's very tangible. And it may not be their exact scenario, but they'll get it. They've been in a similar space. And the more specific and tangible you can be, the more it's going to resonate. You are there identifying their lived experience. They're sitting down at that computer. Their finger is hovering over the mouse. It's a live action moment capturing something very specific and powerful. But in order for us to do that, to know them really well, we have to understand their lived experience and their desire. So those are the two pieces that I focus on with regards to niching. Rather than using like surface level characteristics, we talk about niching to that desire and that lived experience. So what is this concept of a lived experience? It was used by various philosophers and thinkers, including the phenomenologists such as Edmund Husserl and Maurice Merleau-Ponty, and feminist philosophers like Simone de Beauvoir. And it's a concept that is very central to phenomenological psychology, which happens to be part of my background. But essentially, it's just capturing the phenomena of an experience. So rather than talking about things in big, grandiose lingo and terminology and diagnoses, it's boiling it down to the experience, the sights, the sounds, the taste, the touch, and the emotion. What is actually seen and felt and heard by the person, whatever it is that they have lived through and are living through, and what's happening for them in their daily life. So they wake up in the morning and blank, what happens? They have conflict with their family, or they sit down to work and they don't know what to write. So as you are going along and perhaps doing this practice for yourself, the two key pieces that are worth making a note of for your audience is, what does your client want to move toward? And what is it that they want to move away from? So let's talk about their desire, what they want, and their lived experience, the thing that's maybe a struggle for them right now. And putting those things into their words and their language. So we have here Alice meeting the caterpillar, who was really a bit contentious, and he's very condescending. And that's not very different from some of the subtleties in the messages of these pain dialing marketers. So here is a sample that I did for this exercise for pain marketing versus desire focus. Now, I have dramatized it a little bit just so that I can make the demo really clear for you, But if you look at the subtle language structures inside the copy, you're going to notice many of the same underlying patterns. So I did this one for my own business with a focus around messaging, since that's what we're here talking about today. So my client would want to move towards things like confident, effective messaging. They want to come across as confident in their writing and their content, maybe even a little bit ballsy sometimes or experimental. They would like to have effective engagement on their post. They want to have connection and alignment to their ideal clients. They want to make sales that feel in integrity to them. And they want to attract aligned clients that they're going to really enjoy working with. And the things to move away from would be having really inconsistent, spotty, or random content, having offers that just fall flat and don't sell, having boring or irrelevant content that's not capturing their audience or engaging them, or content that doesn't match up with their offers, having any form of icky feeling promotions or feeling like they're struggling to get ideas of what to write, being unable to think of content topics. Now, a pain dialing marketer might come along and say some things like, aren't you tired of being so lazily inconsistent with your content, especially when everyone else is doing it so well? Or, let's face it, your marketing sucks. I've actually seen this one in ads before. If it didn't suck, you'd be making sales, right? Or, are you still spending hours writing copy and making 0 sales? Or, even just, you're doing it wrong. We would identify the existing wound here as the person is just not achieving engagement or sales with their content or their offers. And they may already be feeling a little bit unsuccessful and, a little bit like a failure even. And so this pain dialing marketing is attempting to dial that feeling up further in order to sell their solution. And often the calls to action will be extremely directive, maybe even uncomfortably so. Language like, you need to, you better, if you don't, you're losing out. Those are all really good indications that not only is this a little bit of pain dialing marketing, but we may also be seeing some dark triad traits that demonstrate a lack of empathy and respect for the other. And again, you can spot this by kind of noticing, how does it feel emotionally? How does it feel in your body when you read it? What emotional response does it bring forward? Is there a sense of inadequacy? Is there like a feeling of being left out, or feeling like a big loser in some way because you're not doing the thing that they're talking about? And that emotional response is a fabulous indicator of pain dialing marketing. Now, the Cheshire Cat says to Alice, whichever way you go depends on where you want to get to. So it is harder to get somewhere if you're not sure where you're aiming for. Not knowing what the desired goal is going to make it much harder to talk about or to work towards. So identifying the desire is a big piece of helping someone get to where they want to be. And articulating that desire back to them is a very, very powerful and connecting artifact. It not only shows that you understand them, but it contributes to their resolve and their motivation in taking steps to get closer to that desire or goal. Let's take the same situation from the desire-focused marketing side. So if they're going to address that experience of not making any sales or having a lack of engagement, they're going to do it with compassion and empathy, rather than that condescending disdain that we have seen. So they may say something like, I get it. Content feels hard. Coming up with ideas, hard. Being consistent, even harder. And being just engaging enough that it attracts likes and comments and sales from ideal clients, really freaking hard. It's all right, lovely. Well, there are lots of variables that go into these things actually working. Lions and algorithms and the economy, oh my. One variable that we actually can do something about is our messaging. So if it's feeling way too hard, don't panic. There's a lot we can do with only a little bit of tweaking. It really is possible for content to feel easier, for ideas to flood in so frequently that you have to carry a notepad in your pocket, and for your content to be engaging in a way that people are eager and excited to interact with it and to move closer to you. So this is the example from the desire-focused marketer standpoint. By starting off with talking through whatever their lived experience is, showing empathy and compassion, and then shifting over into the desire and the state of possibilities where they might want to move towards. And you can practice writing these in many different ways, being as tangible as possible. But the more you can describe their lived experience in everyday language that they would use, the more likely it is to resonate with them and reach them. And being able to do this effectively means knowing your client really well. It actually all slides together very easily when you have a plan for how to craft your messaging effectively. Mindset and messaging go together just like tea and cake, or coffee and crumpets, or whatever you prefer. Sometimes we make these boxes where we have like our marketing is over here in this corner, and then my mental health and my mindset, it's over in this corner. And thinking of all these little separate entities is like trying to divide yourself up into little pieces. But you are actually a whole being, and you can't ever extract your mindset out of your business. As we've seen today, messaging and mindset are intrinsically linked together, both our mindset and the mindset of our audience. And as soon as we lose sight of our mindset, the crazier shit tends to get. If you've ever had the experience where you've been working on some content or a project and things are going along really nicely for you, and then something happens, you have some type of a difficult interaction, an email, a text, a conversation, and starts making you feel kind of yucky about yourself, when you sit back down to write that content again, it's like your confidence has gone out the window. That brilliant genius that you had just disappears, and everything dries up. All of your juicy, exciting ideas just seem silly now. And all of a sudden, you find yourself wanting to play more careful, be a little bit less experimental, and play it safe. And that is a stark contrast to the times when your mindset is really good, you're feeling really good about yourself, your writing seems confident, maybe even has a little bit of a swagger to it that's much more likely to capture your audience's attention. And so there's never a time when your mindset doesn't matter to your marketing, to your messaging. And what you'll be able to accomplish is very much dependent on it. A lot of times people tell me that the first thing that falls off when they get stressed out or overwhelmed is their content. And yet it's one of the most important, vital tools that we have for building a relationship with new clients and nurturing the existing audience. When we let that go, the results in our business tend to diminish fairly quickly. So it's very important to find ways to make the content process feel easy and sustainable over a long term so that we can continue to be a consistent partner to our audience. Because it's a relationship, not a weekend fling. And that consistency that's paired up with a connecting message builds the kind of trust that is needed to support ongoing sales and success. When I create things, I design them out of the totality of my whole eclectic blend of experience, pulling in data from recent neuroscience research, along with my master's education in psychology and my years of clinical practice and observation of human behavior. And I blend that together with the master's in marketing and all the time I spent in the corporate world, in some cases unlearning things, deconstructing things. And in general, I think you could say that I know a lot about human behavior from all of those years of observation and noticing how various messages impact the psyche, our behavior, our emotions, our motivation. And so you can take all of these different pieces that I've pulled together, all the things that I've learned over the years, and you can benefit from that marriage of mindset, psychology, and marketing skills that I've poured into all of the tools that I create for you. And so with that in mind, the need that we have for connecting content in an optimistic mindset and a message that is desire-driven and client-centered, and the ability to make this all come together with ease, I have concocted some magic to help us to do all of those things in a really fun and creative way. It's called Magic in Creation, and it's much more than a course or a program. It is a journey through understanding your ideal client deeply, being able to speak to their desires effectively, being able to build a long-lasting relationship with them, and also to articulate yourself in a way that really resonates. And it's also about taking care of your mindset, your audience's mindset. So mindset tools, desire-focused ethical approaches that account for various different things like neurolinguistics across different people, differing buyer personas, and pulling together elements like language and neuroplasticity and that impact that that has on our experience. I also added very practical tools like SEO, which is search engine optimization, and tools for repurposing your content, keeping a handy library of content to make that whole procedure feel much easier, and pulling all of that together into something that is very different from anything else, because this eclectic blend, incorporating all of these harmonizing elements, really marry together to create the most perfect magic for your messaging and for your mindset. So you don't have to go out and get 2 master's degrees and 4 certifications and SEO training and all of these different things that I've done, because I've gone and extracted the juiciest parts and turned it into a beautiful elixir for you. When I think about Magic in Creation, we could call it a messaging and mindset program, but it's a really very tangible, practical journey that will up-level and refine your content process and all of the power behind your messaging. It aims to help you to better understand your client's desire and lived experience, all of those things we've been talking about here today, so that you can speak to it in your content and in your marketing in a way that's very captivating, and learning how to craft content that's specific to their stage in the client journey. So you may sometimes hear about it termed as like hot, warm, and cold audiences. I like to speak about it more so in terms of insight, the level of insight that the person has or doesn't have yet based on their exposure to the subject. To me, that just feels like a much more client-centered way of describing it. And someone who's very new to it is going to have a low level of insight. They're not going to understand very much about it. And so they need to be spoken to in a way that makes sense to them. And at the same time, you're going to have potentially other people in your audience who have been following you for a long time, perhaps. They've been listening to you, they've been coming to your trainings and watching your videos and reading your blogs. And now they have a higher level of insight, and you can give them something a little bit different, a little bit more, because they're a little bit more advanced in their understanding of things. Being able to craft content that's specific to those different audiences can be very helpful in meeting them where they are. And then we embed practical strategies around your reach, like using SEO and keywords in your content or your website, and giving you some plans, some templates for your social media marketing, and ways that you can make your content feel very sustainable and very easy to maintain. A lot of people complain about getting exhausted with their content creation process. So I offer you some ways to make that feel simpler for you. And then of course, there's the mindset pieces. So I provide mindset support for you in the form of EFT tapping videos, and there's also a hypnosis audio that's included in the course. And the hypnosis that is included in Magic in Creation is not available anywhere else. It's not for sale. It's not part of my Hypnopothecary, which is my hypnosis membership. It doesn't exist anywhere but for Magic in Creation students. And with any of these things, please feel free to ask me any questions that you have. And I just want to say again how much I appreciate you coming along today. This has been really fun for me. I hope that you have gained something really useful and really valuable in terms of your messaging that you can put into good use. And whether or not our adventure will continue beyond today, I have really enjoyed spending this time with you. And I wish you a totally magical and creative rest of your day.